Hello, everybody. Today is Saturday, May 26th, and we are bringing you Block Digest episode 101 at block height 524,507. Got a little bit of a trimmed down cast today. Rick is spending some time with family, and Acinq is a little busy on the road, but say hi to everybody, JW.
If I can find the mute button, I will. What's up, guys?
Hey, Janine.
Yo.
And Mr. Nopara.
I'd like to note that you guys ruined it because Shinobi said hi, say hi to everybody. So that's what you should have said. So hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
All right. Well,
everybody say hi to the Wookiee as well.
Damn it. Yeah, I was about to say, this is one of those times I'm angry that my vocal cords can't make the Wookiee noise.
Has your Wookiee hair grown back yet?
Yeah, it's stubble at least. Was that not the best GIF ever? I can't believe that I found that. That was exactly what I wanted to express. That was a GIF of a Wookiee with all its hair pulled out.
That was the most terrifying image I've ever seen.
Totally.
I would say it constituted torture. But I don't know. I guess before we get into the news today, obviously I don't want to get into like any of Chris's or Naomi's arguments or like potential responses, but I did want to kind of bring up one point that I didn't really find like a good in to kind of mention yesterday in the discussion with them. But like as far as like scaling the actual blockchain goes in any kind of blockchain system, at least one based on unspent outputs, I really think that the size of the block is kind of a red herring as far as scaling issues go. And that really the chief issue is the unspent transaction output set, because it's like it's literally impossible to validate the contents of a block without making sure that each reference in the UTXO set is legitimate. And the block size kind of indirectly acts, I guess, as a sort of throttle. Like, you know, we're right now around like 2 megabytes. That is the fastest that the UTXO set could continue to grow with each block. And it kind of gets really wonky when you start expanding the block size and start seeing more of a kind of like exponential potential as far as UTXO set growth. And it's really like, you know, I don't want to kind of like try to frame this as like, ooh, I got you when Naomi and Chris aren't here to respond. But I really just kind of wanted to throw that out there for people to think about, because it really is, in my opinion, the crux of scaling a blockchain. And everybody seems to kind of just not consider that aspect of things, you know, focusing solely on the block size and not really seeing how it relates to the UTXO set. So I don't know. Anybody have any other thoughts or inputs from yesterday that they didn't get around to saying?
A ton, but overall, I think it was a good conversation, and I'm glad that we did it. And hopefully, we can have more technical discussions, because the fraudsters and the scammers, they really want it to be as confusing of a debate as possible. They don't want it to come down to 2 or 3 major decision points that people could examine. They want it to be like very much emotional, very much, you know, is Roger a good guy or a bad guy? Like, that's where they want the topic to be, because, you know, it's going to be confusing. So I'm happy with what we attempted to do. I think we did a pretty good job too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really like what I found most enjoyable, was an actual discussion and not like the kind of screaming matches you see on Twitter and Reddit. And I would really like to see more of that, as much as I dislike the BCH project. I mean, a conversation is better than a screaming match. So I guess, I don't know, if there's no other input on yesterday's talk then, I guess? You guys want to just dive into our favorite punching bag?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but we really need to clarify who our favorite punching bag is, because I feel like I don't know what it is. We have so many.
Coinbase.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But so Coinbase has been running around expanding into all kinds of new products and going off on a little bit of a acquisition spree. And the most recent addition to that is a service called Paradex, which is essentially kind of a decentralized exchange built on the Ethereum network. But the kind of distinguishing thing between this and a lot of other DEX projects out there is it's built on top of this 0x protocol. And I haven't really looked too in depth about this, although I have had a few people, mostly traders I know, bringing this up for quite a while, sporadically. And effectively, what it's trying to do. Let me just find this graphic in here. It's very simple. Here we go. What it's trying to do is kind of establish a dApp on the Ethereum network that other dApps can plug into as kind of a standard protocol for decentralized exchange. And I mean, as much as I think Ethereum is a flaming pile of dog shit that's going to inevitably implode on itself in the coming years, the thought process behind this is actually a legitimate thought process. Because kind of the problem Ethereum DEXs are dealing with right now is everybody's running around like putting together their own code, their own APIs, like their own way of doing things. And so you have a bunch of scattered, isolated pools of liquidity as far as like decentralized exchange between different ERC20 tokens. And so what 0x is pretty much attempting to do is give everybody that single standard with a little higher degree of security scrutiny, although not that historically has meant much with Ethereum, to plug into and pool everything into that single liquidity pool and try to kind of solve the fragmentation issue going on right now. And Paradex, from what I've been able to see digging in a little bit, is just kind of one company that's building on this protocol. And really, like the technicals are kind of a side tangent as far as I'm concerned on this. This is really, in my point, like this is showing where Coinbase is thinking long term. Like they are really digging into this pivot towards the Ethereum ecosystem. And despite all the regulatory like lack of clarity in the United States as far as whether Ethereum is a security, you know, the status of a utility token versus a security token and so on and so forth. So they're pretty much going to be launching this exclusively to non-US citizens. But in their statements, they've explicitly said that they are kind of pushing for and looking for that regulatory clarity to launch this in America. And like, you know, this is just another example of like, what the fuck is this company thinking? Like all of their money was made off of Bitcoin. Like the company was literally launched as a Bitcoin platform. And they are now not just offering sales for different tokens to try to get more trading fees or kind of putting out the PR statements to justify that. Like they are full blown sinking massive amounts of capital now into building shit out in the Ethereum ecosystem. When honestly, in the long term, like this is going to fucking implode on itself. And like, this is one of the most irresponsible things I can imagine, kind of projecting this out myself, like where I see this going over the next 6 months or a year. Like they're going to just start going nuts, pushing all kinds of nonsense utility tokens, all kinds of ridiculous projects that you can just boil down to pay for something in Bitcoin, why does the actual product itself need to be on a blockchain? And this is like, people need to like, you know, I know yesterday, like we had this discussion with a Bcash supporter and Naomi, and kept it very civil. And I think in context, like, that is because those are two civil people actually trying to offer legitimate arguments. And like, there needs to be a recognizable line where you extend that courtesy, and a line where you recognize that courtesy is not deserved. And at this point, like, Ethereum in my mind is unquestionably on the other side of that line. And they are now actually having one of the biggest companies in the cryptocurrency ecosystem sink massive amounts of capital into pushing this kind of nonsense. And I mean, like, this is really going to be a problem over the next few years.
Yeah, this is an interesting story from a couple angles. One is that, yeah, they're just pushing further and further into scammy products. And that's interesting, to the point where they don't even want to provide this product to US customers because they're afraid of the consequences, because it's so scammy. And maybe they would say, "Oh, it's not scammy. It's just it's the SEC or something." But these things are like, they make like the housing bubble look like really responsible, right? Like there's such garbage that's wrapped up in these investment products. So it is very scammy. It's interesting that they want to provide these services and allow people to invest in this stuff. And it's also interesting.
I think we got a little bit of a button malfunction going on right now.
Adam, stop muting me, dude. So it's interesting that they've built this, or that they want to offer these scammy products. But it's also interesting that in order to do that, they've shown that they have to use a decentralized exchange, or at least that's safer from a regulatory standpoint, right? And maybe excluding US customers, which you can't really do on a decentralized exchange very well anyway. But that's their whole thing, right? They're a centralized exchange. So I don't know, man. It seems like I never know whether these guys are like, they're realizing how stupid their business model is, and that they can't secure this stuff, and that they might as well just become a bank, because they're not going to have the freedom to innovate in any way. And that they're not even sure how they're going to make money, because the whole centralized exchange concept is flawed and they don't know what to pivot to. Or if they're just super scammy and they just keep throwing themselves into stupider decisions for that way. So I don't know if this is like flailing around trying to find a place to pivot to that's legitimate, or if it's if it's just more of the same and they just really enjoy doing really stupid and evil things. I'm not sure, but it is interesting. And I feel like both things are very in play in this particular move.
Okay, I mean, it's really insane thinking. I mean, if you look at the scalability issues Ethereum's dealing with right now, they've had like one legitimate token, like CryptoKitties. And I mean, it's pointless, but I mean, it was something that actually necessitated use of the chain. The rest are just nonsense scam coins that are literally just people trying to pocket as much money as they can. And both of those things on their own, in multiple cases, brought the entire network grinding to a halt. What would happen if you actually build some kind of utility token that is constantly used? Like something, not just like CryptoKitties, where it's some fucking nonsense like fad thing like Rare Pepe. I mean, like a legitimate, here's a token, you stream this token to access a web service or something. Like there is no way that network can handle that kind of load and not implode on itself. And yet you have Coinbase literally investing in this company whose entire business model is predicated on the assumption that that kind of load will happen and necessitate trading between all these different things. I mean, like the logic behind this move is like non-existent from my point of view.
Yeah, I don't know if they're just, I mean, the only thing I could think of if I tried to create a narrative that was intelligent is they want to experiment with a decentralized exchange, because they know that they're not going to be able to survive as they're built long term. But I don't know. I think that's probably stretching given their track record of just like absolute lunacy over the last 6 months. Every move they've made has seemed really stupid. So it's probably projecting more intelligence into that organization than they deserve.
Well, I mean, to make the assumption they're not stupid, like look at all the expansion they're making into kind of industrial and like big finance markets right now, like the custodial things for big institutions, the like GDAX rebranding, like the entire system they're trying to set up to kind of bridge order books and OTC trading. I mean, like from the assumption they're not completely incompetent, would it make sense that they're pretty much expanding in those directions to try to funnel that money into propping up or pushing something like Ethereum as an alternative that is much more easily like tameable or controllable than something like Bitcoin?
I guess it would. I mean, if they're assuming that they're not going to be able to be a profitable business without regulatory capture, this would be a good move. And that is an assumption that a lot of these guys work under, right? They're trying to find a place where the competition will be prevented from messing with them. And that requires government. And in order for the government to be able to do that, you have to have an insecure blockchain. So that's, we're still probably projecting more intelligence onto these guys than they deserve, but that's a pretty good theory.
Well, I mean, it's like, because like one thing, like, I don't know, I didn't put it in the news desk just because it's kind of a little bit of a old thing, like maybe a week ago. And I still haven't had the time to dig into a lot of the changes with the Dodd-Frank kind of neutering that just happened. But there is actually a law firm, Millibank, I think, that put up a kind of a written letter to all of their customers dealing with like banks getting involved in crypto. And there is a subsection of the Dodd-Frank Act called the Volcker Rule, which pretty much dictates like the conditions in which a private bank can take consumer funds and invest them in certain types of products. And pretty much from how they broke it down, it seemed like the dividing line is pretty much what like the SEC and the CFTC has been dealing with lately, is like all of these assets fit the characteristics of a bunch of different kinds of legacy assets. And like they're really kind of struggling, at least outside of ICOs, to differentiate between a more commodity-like crypto asset and a more security-like crypto asset. And that's pretty much like the dividing line in the Volcker Rule as to whether banks would actually be allowed to invest heavily or become heavily exposed to anything in the cryptocurrency space. Is if it fell more on the line of a commodity, it would be okay. But if it felt more along the line of a security, then they were explicitly prohibited from exposing themselves or investing in any crypto asset. And so with like my understanding so far, at least, of like the changes in the Dodd-Frank Act, they've kind of neutered the Volcker Rule a little bit and kind of given banks and institutions a lot more wiggle room to invest in more speculative, like derivative-based or security-like assets. And to kind of see Coinbase dive in this direction, like right after that rule change, especially when prior to that, like you had an actual like law firm kind of looking into how this rule would affect a lot of banks' movements lately. I can't look at that with my tinfoil hat on and not see some kind of favor trading going on in the background. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, if I took all the moves that they've made in the last 6 months and tried to make sense out of them, I wouldn't be able to tease apart the incompetence from the maliciousness. But yeah, I mean, I think they're all valid theories. The good news is they probably won't be here in 5 years, right? Like I really don't see them lasting. So they're making themselves more and more relevant. I think the more they invest in things that are going to zero, the more confident I am that they're going to zero. And that seems to be a consistent, predictable trend.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, no para, Janine, you guys got any 2 cents to toss in on this?
No, I don't really have as much expertise in this as you guys.
I have no expertise in anything but speculating wildly, no para. All right, well, I guess I don't know if there's no more anybody wants to say on this. Ready to take it to the next story?
I'm really looking forward to the next story because I've been hearing about this R3 Corda thing, and I don't know much about it, so I'm going to ask you guys a bunch of questions. So,
Oh, you ready, Gin?
Yeah. So it's certainly not as exciting as CoinDesk has kind of been portraying it. So basically on May 23rd, the 11th annual European Post-Trade Conference, sounds like a fun time, was held in London, and one of the keynote speakers to discuss apparently the impact of Brexit for capital markets from a post-trade perspective, lots of buzzwords there, was Jeffrey Tessler. And he's on the executive board of Deutsche Börse, which is a stock exchange in Frankfurt. According to the bio of him that is presented on the AFME website, he is responsible for clients, products, and core markets division that combines derivatives trading businesses, the clearing houses, as well as the settlement and custody business. So for anyone who is not familiar with the lingo, post-trade basically just refers to the process of verifying transactions and rectifying any potential errors that may have been made before fully authorizing the transfer of any asset that's being traded to be settled. Especially for what are called high frequency trades, because if there's any errors being made in those kinds of trades, it builds up really fast, and that can cause a big deal or be a big issue. So that's his domain of expertise, apparently. And so he is looking at blockchains from a settlement perspective. And Deutsche Börse has just announced today that they've signed a letter of intent to partner with HQLAX, which stands for High Quality Liquid Assets Exchange. I think the X is usually stand for exchange, but they don't include that in the description on their website. And it's basically a platform for liquidity transfers to create their goal is to create a securities lending solution. So when CoinDesk has this title where, they're going to offer crypto products, keep in mind that does not mean cryptocurrencies. That just means they've put a blockchain in something and somehow that makes it crypto. So definitely not. The reason I thought it would be important to point all of this out is because, once again, it's an instance where the word crypto is applied, and so Deutsche Bank, and there's a bunch of people who mistake that for Bitcoin. They are as far from Bitcoin as you could possibly be. So the HQLAX website states that their goal in particular is to create what they call DCRs, or digital collateral receipts, that will represent baskets of securities held for safekeeping at a trusted third party. Trusted third parties. I thought we were trying to get rid of those, but never mind. The free exchange of DCRs will affect legal title transfer of the underlying securities that comprise the DCRs, thereby facilitating liquidity transfers without the operationally onerous requirement to move securities. So this is all about moving securities around. No cryptocurrencies involved here. So representatives from Börse, which I think is in this article that Shinobi has up, I read a quote from the HQLAX website, so that's not directly in this blog post, but according to their representatives, they say that the partnership is expected to foster market adoption by enabling seamless connectivity with HQLAX for both trade execution and post-trade processing. So the stickler in all of this, as JW pointed out is that it will be powered by Corda, which is R3's infamous blockchain, but not actually blockchain. Because if anyone was following me back in early 2017, you might have seen that I made a tweet thread about a blog post that they had written about how Corda is not really a blockchain. It's not traditional blockchain, because I always find it funny when companies in the space use the word traditional blockchain, because I don't know, traditional just seems like a term that you would not apply to something that's only 9 years old, but that's just me. So they when people were saying, "Oh, you're not actually building a blockchain," R3 was like, "Well, we were never really trying to build a blockchain. We were building a distributed ledger." And then a few months later, I think it's in a different thread, but a few months later, they were like, "Oh, we actually kind of want to keep the blockchain buzzword." And so they, on their website, they now say that Corda is a distributed ledger platform, aka blockchain. So apparently they're the same thing. But I think everyone's just a bit confused with all this semantics tomfoolery.
That's pretty good. It's like if you don't want to call it a traditional database, you just call it a non-traditional blockchain.
Yes, and I believe they also use the term blockchain inspired. I think their CEO or something said that at Consensus or one of the big conferences last year. It was really ridiculous. He said that they were not. I think the reason it came up is they were asked whether they consider themselves to be a blockchain company, and someone at R3 said, "We are a blockchain inspired company," something along those lines. So pretty nice.
That's pretty good.
Some backstory here. In 2000. I don't even know when, back then, when I was working on blockchain, then I read all the blog posts of Richard Kendall Brown, and he had hundreds of blog posts on Bitcoin and blockchain and things like that. And I really liked it. Everything made so much sense on a theoretical level. And later, he became the CEO of R3. When R3 was, I guess you're familiar with the story. A lot of banks put a lot of money together and gathered a lot of A-team people like Tim Swanson and Mike Hearn and this Richard Brown. He was actually working at IBM. I don't know, maybe he was CEO there. Anyway, so, and I stopped following him, but when the R3 news came out, I was looking at his blog again, and he was very, very clear that they were trying to build something blockchain, but they said we should concentrate on something, that's useful and not just go for the hype. And later on the blog post, he said, "Okay, guys, it's official now. We have nothing to do with blockchain and things like that. We are building something, but it's not gonna be blockchain. There's not gonna be proof of work, anything." So he was pretty clear about that. I'm a little lost that why people are associating with blockchain R3 Corda. I'm lost. What does they have to do with each other?
One gets you lots of investor money and the other doesn't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It would be really hard to convince a bunch of investors that this new database technology is really going to change the world.
Makes sense.
So basically what I've found is that people who want to ride on the hype of Bitcoin, but they aren't actually building anything that's nearly as interesting as Bitcoin, they'll use the word blockchain. If they want to try to make a statement about how Bitcoin is bad, it's inefficient, it's not good enough, then they use the word distributed ledger because blockchain is too close to Bitcoin. That's basically how it's progressed over the last three or so years, is that they've gone from saying blockchain, not Bitcoin, to distributed ledger, not blockchain. That's what I've seen.
I mean, it's like I don't know. It really is freaking annoying too, because there are a lot of interesting cryptographic things you can do that are financially applicable or applicable in a lot of these industries trying to jam blockchain into everything that have nothing to do with the blockchain. And I mean, it's like, I don't get why there hasn't been a firm yet that goes and gets some PR agency and just spins things that way to kind of be able to just disconnect from the entire blockchain nonsense and then kind of like gain that view and popularity that way. You know what I mean?
So I found the quote from R3. It was actually at the Construct 2017 conference. I'm not sure what that was about, but anyway, Clemens Wan from R3, he was quoted as saying, "We found that we didn't want a blockchain. We wanted to be blockchain inspired." So that was what he said.
Fair enough. So far, it's a good quote.
I mean, I don't know how blockchain inspiring it is to have a database that just has third parties again. Like because I guess it's not cool to say you're database inspired. That's not, something trendy that you say. But blockchain inspired, I feel like you should at least say we're not going to have third parties involved in this. Like, to say that you're blockchain inspired doesn't make any sense in the context of what they're building here with securities.
Let me translate it for you. It means we found that blockchain doesn't work, but we came up with something useful instead.
That would be really generous. Yeah, I mean, maybe that's their thought process. I wouldn't be that generous personally, just not knowing the guy. But yeah, maybe. I think
it's not the same guy actually. What I was talking about, it's the CEO. I was talking about the CTO.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, let them keep cranking. I mean, we'll wait until they get hacked and destroyed, and then people that don't listen to us will understand.
Yeah, that's why you should be looking for things like a Xiaomi and eCash server. Just dump the spent database publicly and use an HSM for the keys.
Yeah, I really wanted to say that yesterday, but it was so hard to get involved in the conversation, and that's something that OpenBazaar really should look at, It's almost the perfect solution for them.
I mean, I can't disagree. That'd give them the scalability, give their users privacy, and really deal with all the liquidity issues. It would just be issue and redeem from a point instead of trying to link everything into all the individual vendors. Sucks though. I mean, they want to go some other direction. What are you going to do?
Well, I mean, the theme is companies come up with ideas. They make assumptions about what Bitcoin's going to do, when it's going to do it. Those assumptions, normally 9 times out of 10, they're flawed anyway. But I think Bitcoin makes it more like 999 out of 1,000. Those assumptions are flawed. And then they struggle to try to pivot and find a way to be useful. So I think it's like, we're going to talk about Acinq later, but I think those guys are the exception to the rule. Yeah, I mean, I think we're just going to continue to see companies like Coinbase come up with something that works temporarily and then not know what the hell to do with themselves and end up just being too tempted to go after a scam.
It sucks. I don't know. Everybody ready for a Shinobi segue? Think you've got some updates from NBitcoin developer land, right? No, Para?
Yes, we indeed did.
I will whip us through it.
All right. Go to the issues. And it's basically when Bitcoin Cash upgraded to a new version. Bitcoin EBC is their client, the name of their client. And Bitcoin stopped working with BCH. This is a new thing that and Bitcoin started supporting altcoins, and they basically hard forked
like Libitcoin.
everyone. Yeah, so basically hard forked out other clients. I don't know how severe this issue is, but yeah. So this happened. Let's go to the next issue, because it just for context. Support new opcos for Bitcoin Cash. The next issue is, yeah, they want, this GSPP guy want us to do some new features for Bcash, and I think I just lost my Bcash virginity. That's the first time I called it like that. You guys are bad influence. Okay, so GSPP wanted us to do a new feature, and Nicolas Doria told him that we're not gonna do it, but he can make a pull request and we take a look. All right, so for that, he opened another issue, and this is going to be the fun part. Stop needlessly disrespectful behavior towards certain cryptocurrency projects.
Very classy. He kept it professional, and he's clearly trying to get the the support of the people he's begging to do free work for him. That's very nice.
real quick though, Nopar, it's like the previous change they're asking for with the script evaluator, isn't like that pretty much one of the most like sensitive things you could start fucking with, as far as like introducing changes and having to make sure that absolutely nothing was broken in the process?
Well, yeah, that's in the core of it, but I don't think that's problematic. I mean, it's really like we put it, we accepted a pull request for, all right, so now we can support BCH, and it doesn't mean like we want to resolve their issues, but it's okay. Let's read this first sentence. Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Gold are sometimes referred to as Bcash, Bgold, and Trash by this project. This happens in the commit logs as well in the code. Constants are being called Bcash, for example, and there actually is a public class Btrash address.
Oh, that's great. So since these guys can't write their own code, they're asking Bitcoin to do it for them. And then they're, offended because the Bitcoin guys are calling it Btrash, and they're going to have to pull in these classes. And, potentially Roger Ver's coin is going to have some code in it if they're not really careful with references to constants like Btrash.
I wasn't even aware of this. Well, how can you name a variable this? Anyway,
right.
Anyway, so what happened here is that this guy wanted us to change something, and we said we are not gonna change it, but he can change it, and we look at the pull requests. But he did not make the improvement. Instead, he opened an issue complaining. This is, I don't know.
Yeah, these guys, I mean, like they're such idiots. They don't even know how to pull off the scam. Like, it's like Craig Wright just freaking out and calling like all Africans stupid, or what, however he phrased that. Like it's not even self-serving, right? Like, they're not even very competent con men. So this guy's trying to like convince people to do work for him for free, and he doesn't get the absolute response he wants the first time, so he just freaks out. And now that what are the chances that anybody's going to be nice to him and write that code for him? Like, you know, they were pretty low before, but had he been classy and, you know, differential about it, he may have pulled it off. But yeah, those guys are on a technical front, those guys could not be less of a threat. So at least we have that comfort.
Craig doesn't need to be classy. He needs to be clashy.
Clashing,
you know, but if you just make a pull request to change the Bcash code into, I don't know, something as BCH to fix these things, because it wasn't us who built this. Obviously, we are not building support to Bitcoin Cash, so we just Nicolas Zurier just merged that code without really, you know. He thought it's funny. It can be like that. And, you know, he should have just put a pull request to change it, but he wasn't even capable of doing that. And I bet Nicolas would have just accepted it. All right, it's no hard feelings. But when you open an issue and want us to fix something with a coin that's whole purpose is to attack the coin, but this whole library is written, and when we say that it's okay, we're not gonna fix it, but you are free to fix it, then you start complaining about, I don't know, just come on.
It is pretty. I mean, it is crazy, like how generous the Bitcoin devs are with like Eric Lombroso is still trying to be really generous with Roger Ver and, you know, act like, well, maybe he's just confused. Like the amount of generosity, it's way too much for me most of the time. It actually starts kind of getting on my nerves because it is an attack. Like Bitcoin Cash or Bcash is an attempt to steal the brand. It's an attempt to introduce a security flaw. Not everybody can understand that. That's fine. But all the technical people do understand that, right? Everybody that's competent does understand that 32 meg blocks is not a safe and necessary move. So that's like the background, and then they do stuff like this. It's
I don't even
ridiculous.
really think the background is necessary. Like, I think this issue itself is just ridiculous enough. I mean, you know, like, you know, I think thinking about it after you said it's not that big of an issue. Like, you probably could just fork the script evaluator and then just add the stuff so that you're not introducing changes to anybody who compiles to Bitcoin, right? No, Para.
Yes, you can just do that.
But it's still like,
you know,
if you mess something up though, and then their node loses consensus with the network, like, who do you think they're gonna come blame? Like you said, just do it yourself and it'll be merged. I mean, even Eric Voskuil with Libitcoin at the Satoshi's Vision conference, when asked, was like, yeah, we will build in like the necessary things to let you compile this for Bitcoin Cash. Like, I have no problem with that. Like, I'm just maintaining code. If you want to use the code, go ahead. And like this whole reaction is ridiculous. It's like, I personally think is part of the aspect of what started causing and exacerbating this whole rift is there are a group of people out there who feel entitled to the developers' time and effort. It's like, I want this, so you do this. Like, you have to do this because I want it. And I mean, that's just not how the world works. Like, you're not entitled to other people's time for free.
Yeah, you know, they don't fork the project because then they would have to maintain it, and they don't want to maintain it, of course. They want us to maintain it, and yeah. So that's it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm feeling more and more confident in my investment thesis every day.
But I mean, it's like, you know, I feel kind of obliged to do this, especially like with how civilly like the discussion went yesterday. But it's like that there are some rational people on the other side of the fence. And I mean, I might disagree with their conclusions, but like, I think the more that like this stuff going on with Roger and Craig continues, like the more I'm seeing the kind of somewhat rational people on that side of the fence kind of step away and try to differentiate from that. And like, I think the conversation yesterday was really productive. And I think kind of going that extra step to kind of differentiate between different like subgroups in that group, I guess it would really be worth the time. You know what I mean? Like it seems, even if it still ends in disagreement, it seems a lot more constructive to talk with people willing to actually talk, as opposed to just getting in shouting matches with people who either aren't going to talk or just aren't even real people.
Yeah, I think aren't real people is the main thing that I've seen, because, you know, Roger is the main spokesperson, right? And he's got his talking points and he runs through those talking points. And if somebody catches him and makes a clear argument that he's not ready to interact with, or he feels like it's going the other way, he just throws a fit or deflects or whatever. So it was nice to talk to people that are not playing that game, that are actually having a dialogue. But it's also fun to make fun of that side too on occasion. I think we can do both, and I think that pull request clearly deserves some mocking.
But, yeah, if history is a guide, I'm going to probably get really trolly in a few hours after just saying this on Twitter.
Yeah, I think there's a time and place, right? Like if we have folks from that side on that want to talk, that's great, and you know, we can be real friendly and try to get to the technical issues. But then again, you know, sometimes we just need to point and laugh too.
Yes, speaking of there being a lot of, you know, accounts and stuff that aren't actually people, I think for anyone who thinks that, oh, that's not really true, there's a lot of people behind Bitcoin Cash, it's like all you have to really do is look at the number of transactions and the actual block sizes that are being made on Bitcoin Cash. This was one of the things we were talking about yesterday in the troll box, but it wasn't actually brought up during the show, because it was kind of implied throughout the conversation that there was all of the reason that Bitcoin Cash exists is because there was so much excess capacity that Bitcoin could just not handle. And so now we're past that point, and we've basically seen, you know, Bitcoin Cash generating blocks that are on average maybe 100 kilobytes, maybe 200 kilobytes at most. There's been a few blocks that have been over 2 megabytes, but not a ton. I think it's in the double-digit number of blocks, and they've already processed like tens of thousands already. So that's why I'm personally, I think it's worth it to talk to people on that side, and that's why I think yesterday's conversation was important. And the reason, like for me at least, that's easy to do because I don't personally see it as a threat, because there's really not a lot of people using it. I just don't see people using it. So the idea that, like, yes, they're competing, but I don't really see them as a competitor because I don't see the technical expertise. I don't really see the demand, and that's reflected in the blocks that are being processed. So yeah, I'm totally up for just having conversations with people to like figure out why, you know, a certain small number of people are supporting this and what the reasons are. Like, that's interesting to me. So I would definitely want to do something like that again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was cool.
I mean, dialogue is always better than shouting. All right. So,
except if it's a VUCA.
I really got to work on that.
That's why you should have talked yesterday.
Droids don't pull their arm sockets out when they lose.
Exactly. Yeah, good stuff.
All right. You guys ready to hop into the next story?
Definitely.
This is pretty awesome. The High Court of Zimbabwe has suspended the ban on cryptocurrency possession, trading, and use set by the central bank. And you know what the best part is, JW?
What the best part is that we know that somebody was paid off, because that's how governments work.
The bank didn't even show up to the court hearing started by Golix, one of the exchanges in Zimbabwe. They were ordered to pay all of the legal expenses for the suit on Golix's behalf and have, I think, 10 days where they can try to oppose the high court's ruling. But yeah, I'm betting based on the fact they didn't even show up and it was overturned, that's either not going to happen or not successfully overturn the ruling. But I mean, courts are one of the few things that people can actually try to influence things with. And when enough people get fed up with bullshit and go to the court, it can actually have an effect. And we've seen multiple times.
You're falling into the government narrative of separation of powers. It does not work like that. And I think if you can understand a little bit more of how a corrupt place like Zimbabwe operates, it'll be that much easier to apply it to the United States. There was just money that exchanged hands, right? There was money, political favor, whatever. Maybe it was pro-Bitcoin guys this time. Maybe it was anti-Bitcoin guys that time. But it had nothing to do with anything written down in the law. It was just a political decision that was made.
No, I don't have that black and white of a view of things. This was literally overturned on the basis that the central bank had no authority to enact any kind of legislation. I mean, yeah, most of the time it's broken, but even a broken clock is right twice a day, JW. And
I'm not saying it's not the right decision. I'm saying that you can't buy into the narrative that the courts love you and will take care of you.
No, that's not at all what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that if enough of the populace is pissed off about something, the court has to side with them. Because at the end of the day, if you push everybody too far, you're talking about a minuscule amount of the population trying to prevent the rest of it from tearing them to pieces. You can't do that. After a point, if enough people demand something, you have to cave, or you have to go full on crazy fascist. We will kill anybody who doesn't do what we want to say.
Actually, even when you go full on crazy fascist, you still have to make sure that you pay off the right people and you appease the right people in the population and you set up the right things. If 80% of any population wants you dead, you're dead. So there's always there's always appeasement of the population in any of these systems. And it's not always obvious that there's more people on the inside versus the outside in a democracy or in a dictatorship or in a monarchy or in some crazy place like Zimbabwe. And what I'm saying though is that both of those decisions were political decisions. If you can get your head around this, that it will make everything else a lot clearer when you're trying to analyze what governments do. But
that political decision comes down to, do we want to risk pissing off a huge chunk of the population who will see that this is us fucking them?
Right. But there is no us, right? Whoever is in there's different factions. So the guys in the central bank, they did want to make that trade-off. There was enough money being offered them or enough rewards for them to say, yeah, we'll go ahead and do this. And yes, it will piss off some people.
Or fear of their jobs. Or fear for them.
Yeah, I mean it's coercion and corruption and rewards, right? I mean that's what's driving these guys, and the guys that have the muumuus on that are down the street
for society.
Exactly. Just because the guys down the street are wearing muumuus instead of suits.
You're walking through the logic for my argument is that there are those factions, the bank, and the court is another one of them, and the court, at the risk of being the final arbiter of this and accountable to the people if they piss enough of them off, didn't play ball with the bank.
But
I'm saying that general dynamic is something that exists in most countries that have a court system and a banking system.
All right, we'll agree to disagree then. Because what I'm saying is there is no difference to it. You're not hearing me then, because I am disagreeing with you. What I'm saying is that the only difference between the decision that the Federal Reserve made was the clothes that they were wearing when they made that decision. They were just as self-centered and self-motivated and aware of the population
I'm
and
not
their desires
contesting
as the
that.
courts were.
But my point is that the court is the final arbiter. And if enough of the people say we're not putting up with this thing, the court is going to side with the people. And that is a universal dynamic in a country with a court system.
That is the exact same dynamic that applies to the Federal Reserve.
No, but that's what I'm saying is we're not disagreeing. Like something was lost in the lexicon translation here.
All right. So the final arbiter thing, I don't agree with either, right? Because if the Federal Reserve thinks that they have the political power to disregard the courts, which happens on a regular basis in lots of different countries, and then it has to go back to the courts, all they have to do is say, okay, we're not going to do it for that reason. We're actually doing it for money laundering now. Now the courts have to make another decision, right? And during that period of time, they can do what they want to do. So there's no final arbiter. It's all just political trading and political games. And sometimes things come out in your favor and sometimes they don't. They're all gangsters with just different logos on the outside of the building. And there's nothing that's ever final. It's just, we'll see who greases whose palms next and find out what they decide to do. And it's exactly the same in the United States. We're just a little more subtle and a little better at our marketing.
Absolutely everything is not always clusterfucked, JW.
No, just government. By definition, it's the role of government is to take money from one group and give it to another group. And it's their role is to violate private property rights. They have absolutely nothing else that they're even designed to attempt.
No. What they do is those things. Their inherent purpose was specifically to uphold those property rights.
That's marketing.
No, that's things being twisted from their intent. And that happens all the time in the world. A lot more with big influential things.
All right. I will get you to read some Hans Hermann Hoppe at some point. But for now, I think we've beat this horse to death.
All righty. Any more government cracks before we slide along to some actual news?
I recommend the Love Gov series on YouTube.
What is it? It sounds interesting. Is it a series of shows mocking the idea that government loves you?
It's a series of videos where you have two characters. One of them is called Gov, and it's like, if Gov was your boyfriend, what would your boyfriend be like?
Oh my gosh, that sounds so good. I'm totally going to check that out.
Yeah.
I love mocking education. I think comedy is the best way to communicate ideas sometimes.
And in other news, I think we might have mentioned this really quickly at some point in the past when it rolled out on testnet. But Acinq, the developers of the Eclair Lightning wallet, have developed this Strike API, which is pretty much, I think, going to fill a very important gap in terms of liquidity and connectivity on the Lightning Network for a whole lot of merchants out there. I mean, obviously, I'm going to recommend personally you directly accept the Bitcoin and hold it yourself at all times if you can. But, everybody in the world isn't like me. And there are going to be plenty of businesses and people out there who either can't do that or don't really care that much, as long as most of the money winds up directly in their hands eventually. And this API is pretty much set up to act as an endpoint for merchants. So effectively, instead of directly making your Lightning payment to a merchant, you would make it to a company or provider who offered this API and be able to configure regular net settlement sums that would be sent to you on chain. So you could effectively have whoever's running this API act as a payment processor for you over Lightning Network, and to whatever thresholds you want to configure, have things aggregated and sent to you on chain periodically to keep your risk exposure to whatever that threshold is. And they would also be set up to allow you to kind of manually withdraw while paying a fee of, I think it was 0.5 milli BTC right now. So like if you want to withdraw a specific amount below the threshold, you can do so immediately. And yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what I expect Square to be working on, or maybe even integrate this directly as far as like their merchant processing services, because I mean their entire business model is processing payments. And so when you can just plug Lightning into it like this and still just handle like moving the money to the merchants on the back end yourself, like this really like solves a lot of Lightning Network issues for anybody comfortable with this trade-off, in that everything would route to one point instead of having to have all of the extra liquidity to route to individual merchants, and simply aggregate things like periodically to allow a merchant to decide their own risk exposure. And I mean, like this is the kind of stuff like I was kind of really lightly touching on yesterday. Like there is a lot of things right now being worked on to kind of plug a lot of gaps in Lightning Network, or like deal with inefficiencies in certain ways that exist now. And I mean, like the pace of development on something like this is not going to be like Bitcoin itself. Like you don't have to go get somebody's permission. You just make sure your client can talk to somebody not doing stuff you're doing as well, and you can do whatever the hell you want. Like this kind of, I think this is going to kind of flip on its head, really, like the pace at which development in this ecosystem takes place.
Yeah, I love these guys. I love Acinq. This is, you're right. This is what Stripe should be doing. This is what Coinbase should have done, something along these lines. They should have just shut down their merchant processing. They should have made it useful now that the technology is available to make it useful. And I mean, I see this is just good in every way, right? Yeah, it's, you know, if people use this API, they're not, you know, they're not fully validating their own transactions. They're outsourcing that, and that's less secure. But on the other hand, they charge 1%, right? So you're financially incentivized if you're doing any significant transactions to eventually build your own implementation or run your own hardware. But it's also a great way to get going, right? Like if Amazon wanted to start accepting Lightning payments, they could integrate with this API and see how it all works out. You know, try it in beta, try it for maybe, you know, some specific items or whatever, and then either negotiate something with the Acinq guys to drop the 1% fee, or more likely, because the volume that they're going to do, it's going to be significant. They would just they already have like the API part written, right? Like they call the API, then they just build their own version of the Acinq stuff on their side in their own data centers. So it would be a great way to like prototype it, right? Get up and running quick, and then bring it in house if you want to. On the other hand, like there's not that many people that are using Lightning right now. So it's also a great way, you know, even if you're Amazon, you're probably not going to accept that much in Lightning payments today. If you turned it on today, maybe you would if you're Amazon, I don't know. But you get my point. Like there's an adoption thing. So it's not obvious that it's worth it for a merchant to invest in setting up all this stuff on their own. And then on top of that, it helps fund the open source software project of Lightning, right? Like these guys have been one of the 3 teams that have really made a big impact in pushing Lightning forward. So it's awesome. And this stuff is going to continue. And yeah, I'm hoping that within the next month or so, it'll be so easy for MathBot to get this going too. Cause I want to be a customer of what those guys are building.
And I mean, you know, that 1% fee, I mean, really in the grand scheme of things, isn't that much compared to a lot of traditional things. And also, like, you know, you said at larger scales, you can drop that percentage, and like competition, I think could really beat that down even more. I mean, and I mean, like the one thing, and like the one thing I think a lot of us like don't really consider very often is like you know, myself personally, and what I'm going to recommend to other people is do absolutely everything yourself at every step and never expose yourself to any counterparty risk. But a lot of people out there don't mind that. A lot of people out there are going to have to because they're not competent enough to do it themselves. And it's going to be a while before that learning curve kind of, you know, you have older people dying, new people being born to get to the point where everybody can just do this shit themselves. And we do need things like this in the interim to kind of allow people not savvy enough to interact with this stuff. Like we do need it.
Totally. Yep. And it's another like educational thing, right? Like as excited as I am about Lightning and all this sort of stuff, I think Bitcoin was good enough 3 years ago at least. And the main thing that we have to overcome is people being educated and understanding that it will work as a global money so that they'll invest in it and start holding it. Because until it's adopted as, you know, basically savings, until it's adopted as money, payments is kind of secondary. There's niches, you know, like e-commerce, which is a massive niche actually. So I do walk that back a little bit, but I still think the primary thing that has to happen here is just people realize that Bitcoin works, it's valuable, it's going to continue to work, and decide to hold it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, in the meantime, you know, we have like there's a lot of different niches out there. Like, I mean, gambling, remittance payments, like, I mean, even like, you know, over the past week or so, we've seen like 2 banks are using Bitcoin as a settlement network instead of Swift. Like, there are a lot of transactional use cases at different scales than the consumer level to really kind of take advantage of this on the way to getting to be the, like a thing that everybody is saving a little bit of. But yeah. All right, though. I think we've beaten the lightning horse today. Who's ready to see a conspiracy confirmed? A conspiracy that Moi has been screaming for years.
We rode the back of the lightning horse. We did not beat it. It's too precious. we charged on it. All right, what's the conspiracy?
All right, I'm going to be very hyperbolous here, but I have to. BTC-e KGB confirmed. It is the fucking KGB. I told everybody. I knew it. Okay, hyperbole done. But seriously, Alexander Vinnick, the guy arrested in the shutdown of BTC last year, has pretty much confessed. He's dropped his claim that he was not associated with BTC-e, and for a period said that he was a contractor for the company or a technical consultant, and has now recently admitted that he was actually running the operation and has submitted admissions of guilt to multiple agencies in the Russian government and claimed responsibility for $750 million rupees worth of damage, or ruples worth of damage, to Russian citizens in that time. And the source of my hyperbole is that after confessing and offering to help Russian authorities in the investigation, a bunch of mobsters were going to try to poison him before he could testify. And so right now he's pretty much on total lockdown in a Greek prison with no interaction allowed except with the guards. And just as a reminder of context, the U.S. and Russia are still pretty much fighting, trying to extradite him to each respective country. But I mean, yeah, okay. Now that we're past the facts, though, I need to go back to my hyperbole. I mean, he's literally admitting to massive amounts of money laundering and being the operator and proprietor of BTC-e, and literally had Russian mobsters try to poison him before he could testify in court. He was laundering money for the Russian mob. I mean, like, I can see absolutely no other explanation to this, given all of this shit coming to light.
He was one of the stealers from Medgax.
When you say the Russian mob,
but again, Nopar, think that through. He was laundering money for the Russian mob.
all I want to know is when you say the Russian mob, are you talking about like the official mob or like the KGB or like the street mob? Because you know,
nebulously both. But the implication from that is some kind of involvement there with the Mt. Gox hack. Because that is
what I mean is like the
KGB
the KGB, just like the CIA, is a mob, and they have to launder a ton of money.
I know, but there's overlap between those two. But my point is, like, one of the biggest connections that really fucked Vinnick was him laundering the Mt. Gox coins. And he now has a group of people who very notoriously and historically have lots of nebulous connections with things like the intelligence community in a respective country.
So what's your definition of money laundering?
Scrubbing the source of the funds. But like, the overall point I'm getting to, like, JW, is, did fucking Russia hack Mt. Gox?
It's possible.
Like, these are so many.
What would be the difference between that and the United States hacking Mt. Gox? Like, this is my overall point. They're all gangsters, dude. They're all gangsters. Like, Hillary Clinton is a gangster. Trump is a gangster, right? They're all gangsters, and they all have their a certain amount of support. So what I'm saying is, like, the definition.
JW, we've had zero evidence as to who actually committed that hack, like pointing to any specific thing. It's circumstantial.
So let me give you my definition of money laundering, and then I'll shut up about the story. It's hiding money. It's one person hiding money from somebody else, right? So if he's getting in trouble for money laundering, that means maybe he was money laundering for some shady group, but it also probably just means that there's some shady group that didn't want him to be able to do that and see what's going on, right? So you're in his case, it sounds like maybe he was hiding money for one dirty group so that another dirty group didn't know about it. Now that other dirty group found out about it, they're pissed off and they're beating him for it.
I also want to point out that this is Russia, and it does have some similarity with the United States in that they will pressure you to plead guilty or admit to guilt even when you're not guilty, because for most people, the idea of spending years of their life fighting the government to usually just end up losing most of the time it's not only a waste of time, but the sentencing will probably be harsher if you do not do that. So when stuff like this happens, I'm always kind of suspicious when someone just admits guilt to that kind of thing, because like my theories would be maybe he's not actually the person who did it. He might be covering up for someone else, or he has just been scapegoated. Like, I don't know. I'm not familiar with his name personally, so I don't know what his history is, but I'm always just kind of worried about when this kind of stuff happens, that I don't want to automatically draw conclusions about him personally being involved with stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, real quick, before I think Nopara is about to correct me on something, but like in that situation, I don't think he would be offering to testify against other people if he did not have any involvement. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, I would absolutely offer to testify against other people. If somebody was going to put me in a cage and rape me for the next 30 years and I could make up some bullshit.
But how could you testify to anything if you weren't involved?
Dude, you got to go back and watch The Wire. If I can't get you to read
I know
at least I can get you to go back.
I know
and
exactly
watch
what you're talking. I know exactly what you're talking about.
People testify about things that they have not been involved with all the time. Like,
okay. I'm gonna sell you guys out.
That's a strategy.
No, Para, though. You said I was wrong about the previous evidence of who actually committed the hack.
Yes, so I saw a presentation from VSEC. VSEC is a blockchain analysis company that was created to track down the MedGax funds. And they showed that there were a lot of hacks from MedGax, like not only this one, but a lot over the times, various hacks, even the malleability hack was there too. And the money was just going out. And they were, it was a few days after the they made the arrests of this Vinnick guy, and they showed in that talk, it was Breaking Bitcoin last year, actually they showed in the talk that how they tracked down in the blockchain, and everything was pointing to BTC-e and Vinnick and that guy who was just arrested at Greece, and they were following that guy for a long time now, and he just got arrested, and they were like, shit, we already got him. He just got arrested.
Okay,
They
okay.
didn't
Well, I
even need
mean,
the blockchain analysis. So this was the second thing. But the thing is that, so what could he do? What could he do in 2000 whatever, when even Bitcoin mixers, or he has a lot of Bitcoin, and there is just no that much. Even the best mixers doesn't have enough liquidity, or even if they have, you cannot send that much money out. If you have a lot of money, you just cannot just hide it in Bitcoin, no matter, because that's too much money. So what he figured is that he creates BTC-e, and he's trying to make the funds disappear on BTC-e. But of course, before that, he tried a lot of things. He was selling stuff without even doing any mixing. When you first get into Bitcoin, you don't think you need any mixing and things like that. So before that, he made a lot of baby mistakes, and that's how they were able to track him down. And this was completely independent from the police investigations. So they didn't know the police are going to get him in some other ways, which we don't know how they did. So yeah, Vinnick is pretty much sure that he was one of the hackers of MedGax at this point.
okay.
That's
Well, then let me.
interesting, man.
Well, I mean, yeah. Okay. I was wrong, but it's. Damn it! You dashed my beautiful conspiracy theory to pieces. No.
That's all right, man. It's still fun. You can still tell it. It's still a good story.
I want to see the day that a nation state hacks something to acquire some Bitcoin. Okay, it's got to happen eventually, or the world has not gone sufficiently cyberpunk.
Nation states don't do that. The nation states don't exist. That's your problem. Hillary Clinton exists. Trump exists. Nation states do not exist. And if Trump wanted to get some Bitcoin and had a buddy, and they could get it for him at a discount, he'd probably do it.
But what happened to the BTC funds, the people, the money of the people who were keeping the money there? What happened to that?
38% of it was seized by the U.S. government. The rest was put back into a new exchange that was started, but I don't know a single person who actually went there to go claim any funds, because from my understanding, a lot of people had a lot of multiple accounts and were kind of spreading things around, and nobody I know was willing to touch that because they required you dox yourself, and nobody really wanted to have their name tied to any of the shit that was going on there.
Makes sense. That was a good exchange, actually. It was It was not fucking with people, with know your customers and things like that. You could do anything.
Mm-hmm. But it was also possibly, maybe, kind of, sort of ran by the KGB.
Tell us.
My
right.
conspiracy is infallible truth.
Well, to be fair, Coinbase is run by the U.S. government, so.
Boom. Good point.
All right. Keeping with the Russia theme, though. I know we've covered like a little here and there sporadically for a while on kind of the evolving situation of regulation in Russia, but I missed it. But just before our last show, a draft for kind of digital financial assets regulation went through the Russian State Duma for a first reading, and actually had only one vote against it. And pretty much what this is mostly going to be doing is defining, legally speaking, like things like smart contract, the process of mining. And they're pretty much going to leave in the hands of the Bank of Russia operational procedures for exchange offices. And like a lot of Russian state officials have been saying over maybe the past year, it seems what they're going to be doing is only allow trading on officially sanctioned exchanges, of which the Bank of Russia will be developing procedures for, and explicitly not allowing customers or end users to manage keys themselves. And at the same time, it seems going to be kind of pushing forward with a temporary tax break for a certain period to encourage mining investment. But if this actually kind of passes through the Duma in the state it looks like it's in now, I think they're going to pretty much be doing what I was speculating they're doing most of the past year, just try to encourage mining investment as much as possible and draw in the liquidity in the cryptocurrency ecosystem, but effectively try to completely lock out the population from being able to directly manage anything. So kind of try to encourage all the capital inflow that comes along with letting this industry build in the country, but trying to kind of cordon things off and set up firewalls to prevent the average citizen from actually directly interfacing with it, which is kind of shitty if things keep going in this direction.
Yeah, that is pretty crappy. I don't really have a lot. I mean, I don't have a lot of comment on that. I hope that it's easy for Russians to get a hold of Bitcoin when they want to. That part of the thing that's tough about knowing other countries is just trying to read whether it's like, it's going to be a law that's not going to be enforced or not. And I don't know, but hopefully it'll be easy for people to get their Bitcoin.
Yeah, just in case anyone was like, oh my God, a oppressive government is like telling people that they can't hold their own keys. I just, in case, anyone's hasn't, I don't remember if we actually talked about it on the show yet, but a few months ago, there was a MP in the UK or someone in the UK who was actually saying something along the same lines that the government should be generating private keys for people and then handing them out, and they'll keep a copy. And I guess the guy's argument was, why should people manage their own keys when we make bank accounts for people? We generate the bank accounts, and we still have ultimate control over that. So why would people manage their own keys? We should be doing that. I think the idea was, to have the master key and then distribute out the subkeys to people. So that was something that was being said in the UK. So having that kind of being said in Russia as well does not surprise me.
Yeah, it's just a new iteration of the Clipper chip idea, right? Aren't we fighting that right now over cell phones, right? The backdoor thing. Like, not only do they want to in the United States, I'm sure they would like to do that same concept, but they have they're making sure that they have a recovery key to get into all of your digital life all of the time in the United States. Not to mention everything that you say and do is recorded and archived. So, yeah, Little context before you get too upset about the Russians.
Yeah, but I don't see explicit legislation in the U.S. yet trying to demand copies of keys. I can firewall my shit from compromised devices.
I don't think so. Not if you've got an iPhone, and not if you've got an Android. I think. And actually, are we even allowed not to unlock phones, or do we get a beating for that?
Yeah,
I don't know what the current status is on that.
If it's come on.
I'm pretty sure
if it's a thumbprint lock, they can compel you because it's not like something that you have to actively give. But if it's a passcode, then Fifth Amendment, Fourth Amendment apply, and you can't be compelled to open it.
How is that any different than the bullshit that they do in Russia? I mean, it's all semantics and it's all nonsense, but they're stealing personal paper.
They have to get you to be an idiot and use your thumbprint or your face or other such things to lock your phone instead of a passcode. So I can still go fuck you even if the other idiots can't.
Yeah, so just to explain the difference, the reason that they so far they have made a distinction between fingerprints or face scans, which I think iPhones do. I have no idea because I don't use these things, but the reason they make a distinction
does too on the new models, sadly.
Yeah. So the reason they make a distinction between fingerprints and facial recognition scans and passwords is because there has always been much stronger protection for things that you know versus things that you have. Like your fingerprint is something you have that can compel you to do an action, but they can't compel you to divulge something that you know, because I think it ties into the protection against self-incrimination. So it's a Fifth Amendment. So that's the reason that distinction has existed.
Right, but it's all just bullshit. It's all marketing. If you're trying to get on a flight and somebody says, "Hey, we want you to unlock your phone," which is happening more and more now, almost everybody's going to unlock their phones. They're going to provide their passcodes because they don't want to miss their flight and be out thousands of dollars, or at least hundreds of dollars, and hassle and everything else. So what the US does is just a little bit more sophisticated most of the time. We'll just encourage and provide a certain amount of pressure and coercion for everybody to compromise themselves. And then, those few guys that are like, those jackasses from the ACLU or ACLJ or whatever, or ACLU, we'll just focus on those guys, right? Then we only have to focus our energy on the 15 guys per year that come through Border Patrol or border crossing, and don't give that stuff up. And we get to say that we have, these guys in muumuus that take care of you.
Easy life hack. Everything is backed up in the cloud nowadays, unless you specifically turn it off. Just reset your phone. Okay, here's my phone with the loading screen.
That's not my point, man. I'm not saying that I lack the skills to be able to keep data out of the hands of somebody. What I'm saying is that it's very hard to make a distinction
my point
between
is,
the United States and Russia.
I think there is, because in almost all of these cases in the US, there are actions you can take in which they get absolutely nothing, and there is no recourse for them to take legally. Like, they can't compel me to log in and set up my phone. Like, here's my phone. It's not set up yet.
Good luck with that. We'll see if you get some of the treatment that I would expect you to get.
Okay, here I need to make a new Gmail account before I can do that.
No, actually, I don't want you to do that, man. I encourage everybody not to assert their rights when they're in the back room or at a border protection or border control checkpoint or something like that. I think the most dangerous thing you can do is buy into your own propaganda. If you think that you're in a position to assert your rights and you think they exist because of those guys in the muumuus, you will learn the hard way. And I hope people avoid that. Pick your battles.
So I would like to point out that the situation in the UK, even though it's still a, quote, Western democracy, is a lot different. If you go through an airport, I don't know specifically if British citizens are exempt. I don't think they are. But if you're entering the UK and they ask you to give them your password to one of your devices, your phone or your laptop, if you don't give it to them, they will charge you under the Terrorism Act. They actually did that to, I think he was a director of the Cage Foundation, which does things with, I can't remember what their focus. I think we talked about before, but that happened in the last year or so in the UK, that there was a director who I think works on immigration issues and things like that, and he was detained under the Terrorism Act because he didn't divulge his password for his phone, even though he claimed lawyer confidential. I can't remember if he claimed lawyer. I think he actually claimed lawyer confidentiality. And they didn't buy that. That was pretty scary.
Yeah, the other thing to keep in mind is like there's a book that was written called 5 Felonies a Day, and there's been a lot of people that have done work on this, but governments like the United States, we don't pass laws to do something really oppressive. We just make sure that there's a proliferation of laws out there that not everybody could comply with all the time, and then we do selective enforcement. So if you tell a cop, I'm not going to unlock your phone, I've got 14 other things that if they take their time and really analyze the situation, they'll find out you pulled your car over into a wetland or something, and now you're an eco-terrorist, right? Like there's plenty of ways that the average person can go to jail every single day. And it's just better. It's just smarter, right? Like the United States, they're not going to waste their money on things that aren't as cost effective. That's the only difference.
Yeah,
they don't love you, man. They don't love you any more than the Russians, I promise.
Yeah, I want to point out, if there's anyone who's ever been to Glacier National Park in Alaska, if you ever picked up any goat hair off the ground, you are so screwed, because that's a felony.
A felony. Like you lose your right to carry a gun if you do
back on the ground.
Unless you're a Native American to that area. So that's okay.
But I think if you're Native American, you have to immediately smoke it, or then you get in trouble. It has to be further. No, I'm just kidding.
No, they're there's a very clear, very thoroughly researched felony law that you can't pick up goat hair in Glacier National Park. So just be warned, everyone.
And if you are in Glacier National Park and a cop asks you if you will unlock your cell phone, you need to make sure that you have a checklist that includes "I did not recently pick up goat hair" before you decide that you're not going to unlock it for him.
All right.
I'm proud to be an American, because at least I know I'm free.
America! Fuck yeah! All right, who's ready for a depressing story?
Hit it.
So, a 13-year-old kid was kidnapped in South Africa, and his family was left with a ransom demand for 15 Bitcoins. And they are threatening to kill the kid if the family doesn't pay up. And it's like, to me, like looking at this situation, it is really fucked up. His family, his parents literally don't even know what Bitcoin is. Like, they know absolutely nothing about this. And like some sick fucks out there are pretty much threatening to murder their child if they don't figure it out, get more than $100,000 worth of it, and send it in, I think, a few days was the deadline they gave.
Yeah, this is like barely a Bitcoin story to me. I mean, the real story is that there's assholes that are kidnapping kids in South Africa and ransoming them. We all know that that's the case, right? Like that place is an absolute shithole right now. And I have friends from South Africa, and they're like, it's not as bad as you would think. Like it's overstated, but also, like my friend has a button on his car that when he pushes the button, flames come out the side because it's the carjack capital of the world. But it's not that bad. So it's freaking bad from my perspective. It seems like a real nightmare. And the amount of like government control that is increasing in South Africa is really, really rapid, because they keep taking the monopoly services that they're providing, and security is what they should be providing in this case, that would make kidnapping not cost effective. But of course they're not doing that. But they're not even providing water. Like, they've got all of the citizens freaked out right now about this concept of day zero. And they're propagandizing them and coming up with, terms like day zero to really get everybody freaked out. But it's basically like the day that all the water runs out, right? Like, people are going
water crisis.
Yeah,
That's what they're calling it.
Middle class and upper class people right now in South Africa are walking to the ocean or like a river and getting buckets and carrying them into their house in order to use to like flush their toilet. They're not able to shower much. There's this story that I saw that was absolutely terrifying because it was just so 1984. But this woman shows up to work, and this is a common thing now that they're doing. The government publishes all of your water usage. So companies now are taking water usage of their employees and putting them up. Like, they'll have a meeting and they'll put everybody's water usage up there and shame the people that are using too much water, and say good job to the people that are conserving, or at least finding a way to make it look like they're conserving. That's just, I mean, I can't imagine like a more dystopian sort of experience than what they're going through right now. And it's having the opposite effect. For most people, they're not getting pissed off and wanting to rebel against a corrupt government. They're wanting to be good, submissive puppies and saying stuff like, well, we really should have been conserving anyway. I had no idea how little I could get away with using water. At least the stories that I'm seeing. I'm sure there's a lot of pissed off people too, of course, but yeah, that place seems like a real nightmare right now, and I do think it's barely related to Bitcoin. The real story, if there is one related to Bitcoin, is that these people that provide monopoly services that can't even make it too expensive to be worthwhile to kidnap random kids, those assholes are going to get defunded from Bitcoin. And it's going to solve the problem, because it's going to make it too hard for those thugs to run their extortion racket. In the meantime, they're still going to wreak havoc, but at least they're getting the clock is ticking. So that's my positive spin.
Also, I mean, oh, go ahead.
If you try to be really objective here, Bitcoin really enables some very nasty stuff like Bitcoin kidnappings and ransomwares, but the goods are outweighing the bad things. But I don't think we should just close our eyes and try to say that Bitcoin is not doing bad things too. It does.
How is this any worse than cash? Like, they're gonna have to make contact in order to get the kid, right? So maybe it's slightly better for the kidnapper because they can pay remotely.
I think but you're explaining it now.
Yeah, but okay, so maybe there's a slight, but that would be like, it slightly reduces the risk of the kidnapping.
It incredibly reduces it. Well, the exposure is just the kidnapping, and then you can be paid remotely, and you can literally just dump the victim somewhere and never be like you get that initial exposure.
But listen, the reason that people don't kidnap each other in Western societies very often is that, as shitty as our police service is, and it is really, really shitty, it's not that hard to make it not worthwhile to kidnap somebody, right? You can provide a really shitty monopoly service and still increase the cost enough to where the equation doesn't work out to kidnap your neighbor. That's the context here. So if it's slightly safer for a kidnapper in order to accept ransom with Bitcoin, the real problem is that there's no, like, the security services provided there, the investigative stuff, all of that stuff is so shitty that this is viable. Right. And Bitcoin is not a game changer for that. Right. It's not changing the equation so much that we're expecting a ton of kidnapping to happen in South Africa when there wasn't any before. Right. It would be it's a very incremental advantage, is what I would argue. And I think it's easy enough to get your hands on a duffel bag full of cash. And then, these guys are going to have $120,000 of Bitcoin in South Africa. Who are they going to trade it with, right? Like, we're all concerned about privacy on Bitcoin now. if these guys you think these freaking idiots that kidnap kids know how to use any kind of privacy technology, right? Like, I would argue that as it stands right now, if I was the kidnapper, I'd rather have a duffel bag full of cash in South Africa. So I really, I think the real story here is government sucks, people are suffering, and Bitcoin is going to remove that monopoly. We're still going to have security. It's just going to be competitive. So it's not going to be so shitty that kidnapping a 13-year-old kid is a moneymaker.
Okay, fair enough. All right.
But hopefully they will pay out, and hopefully they'll get their kid back. And I know there's going to be a ton of volunteers to analyze the blockchain and see if we can, if that actually happens. So maybe it'll turn out to be a positive story on that front too.
All right. So upbeat mood shift, kind of, sort of, maybe. I hope so. All your swag belong to us. Okay. So I have absolutely no idea how this was actually granted, but ABC IP Holdings Southwest LLC, which is a subsidiary of Monolith Ltd, who is only registered as a mailbox at a mailbox company, was granted the UK trademark for Bitcoin. And they are now going around pretty much issuing cease and desist letters to an Etsy store that sells Bitcoin paraphernalia and stuff, and demanding all their products now be sent to them, all sold products be recalled and sent to them. And if they don't do this, they're going to sue them for trademark infringement. This is completely batshit insane. Yeah, like exactly like that. That you need to immediately return that to the merchants so that they can not get sued. No para. But yeah, I mean, like, I seriously have no freaking clue what idiot in what office of the UK bureaucracy decided to grant this trademark. It's literally existed for 9 years prior. Like seriously. I mean, like, I still need to like actually find a few hours to go dig around, but like I can't decide right now looking at this whether it's just a completely incompetent lucky patent troll, or if there's actually like some kind of money flow behind the scenes here trying to use this for something a little more manipulative. I mean, it's like
it doesn't add up, doesn't it?
So it's like I like nobody in the developed world right now who pays attention to the media does not at least know the word Bitcoin. Like this just boggles my mind. Like, even the stupidest person on earth, I would have assumed prior to this, would have been like, no, that's been in common use for almost a decade. That doesn't qualify for a trademark.
I wonder if this is just a play to get, 500 or $1,000 out of everybody that you can. Because if I got like a cease and desist, if I was running a normal business and I was using, trying to work in the existing legal system, as officially and all of the standard ways, and then I got a cease and desist order, and I'm looking at it, and they're like, yeah, you use the term Bitcoin, but we'll give you a license so you can use it anytime you want, and it's only going to cost you $500. And you're trying to decide, well, do I get a hold of my attorney? Because the last time I talked to my attorney for, a couple hours, and then he did a couple hours worth of work or whatever, it was $750. Just give these assholes $500 and move on. That stuff happens a lot. So maybe that's the play. I don't know.
Yeah. All right. I don't know. In the interest of time, want to slide along? Because I'm still flabbergasted. I can't think coherently about something that ridiculous. All right. So while the challenge to the banking restrictions is still kind of going through the courts in India, regulators are apparently considering a new tax program for cryptocurrencies. And to be honest, I'm not going to trust this translation that wound up on CoinDesk entirely, but it seems like what they're doing is kind of creating two classifications between goods and services domestically and goods and services imported, and pretty much considering tossing an 18% tax on top of digital currency trades. And there is some mention down here of dealing with transactions for supply, transfer, storage, and accounting purposes would be taxed differently, although I'm not really clear at all what that would practically mean, like on the ground, legally speaking. But I'm kind of more interested in this like goods and service tax of 18% on digital currency trades, which, if I'm assuming and reading that right, I would take to mean actual trades happening on an exchange. And that just seems completely batshit insane to me. Like to tax each individual trade instead of the gains. Like this seems like it would very quickly start disincentivizing liquidity in these markets.
Yeah, and it would also put money in the pockets of some interest group, right? So I can imagine that, you know, some interest group thought, well, if we get rid of Bitcoin altogether, that would be in our, you know, that serve us well. And they decided to start going down that path, and maybe somebody else wants Bitcoin to continue to exist, and they worked out some deal together. Like, well, what about this idea? What if you just get a cut of every single Bitcoin transaction, right? So, I mean, it's just, it's gangsters negotiating with gangsters, trying to figure out the best way to fleece the populace. And they're not the smartest people in the world usually. So they're stumbling around trying to figure out how to do it. But,
well,
but my hope is that they do that. It's a whole lot better than a ban. So hopefully they will do that, and then they'll realize that they could actually make more money by dropping that number to 2% or 1% or whatever. I mean, taxation in India is really interesting anyway. Very few people pay taxes, but yeah, I think that's probably the game that's going on here. Is just, you know, how to siphon the blood of the citizens the most efficiently.
Well, I mean, like, again, to like try and look at this through the lens of assume they aren't incompetent retards. Like adding excessive taxation to each individual trade in that way, disincentivizing liquidity. I mean, to me, in the long term, like if they really try to just pressure things like that and scare away liquidity, then you're talking an environment in which whenever there is actual like growing demand in India with less liquidity on the markets, you're going to see way higher premiums compared to other parts of the world. And like, you know, I'm kind of thinking of like the dynamic for that in itself to act as a huge disincentive for people to buy Bitcoin, which would also itself be a way to kind of skirt taxes, as a lot of people do already. And, you know, thinking along those lines, like having that as a goal to try to kind of dry up liquidity in the market to create this artificial premium whenever there was a lot of demand, and kind of hope that is a big discouraging factor for people.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, it's kind of the argument that I was making with the United States versus Russia earlier, that they don't always just outright ban something. Sometimes they just put pressure on it so that they can, you know, it's more effective PR than trying to outright ban it, but it has the same outcome they want. So that's definitely a viable possibility. I mean, the overarching thing is it's still the same, right? Do they think they can screw people over more by maintaining the central bank and not having the competition of Bitcoin? Or do they think that, you know, they can do better by allowing Bitcoin to exist and making it less useful? You know, they're all just figuring out the ways to screw over the people that that they have access to screw over.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, the more governments start looking in on this space and the more they start getting involved, I mean, you always have to regulate it, but I think people should have the tinfoil hat on more of the time as opposed to less. I mean, not everything a government does is completely reactionary and not thought through. And there is a very long history, especially in the West, of very manipulative, underhanded things being done to kind of steer events without putting themselves in the fucking limelight. But speaking of politics, though, I guess the last story is just something I kind of wanted to, I don't know, just point out and get a chuckle out of, because this is probably going to become a more common thing over the years, and I think really start to kind of create a pro-anti-Bitcoin partisan divide, politically speaking, at least in the U.S. But a former Obama advisor, Brian Ford, is one of the U.S. politicians that's taken to accepting Bitcoin donations for political campaigns, since that was pretty much unanimously approved as something legal to do. Like a decent number of politicians have actually started accepting it. And his rival immediately kind of flipped around and pointed at him going, Bitcoin speculators that oppose cracking down on drug deals and human trafficking are the ones supporting him, and just immediately went to like the worst association with shit you could paint for Bitcoin and trying to kind of taint his political opposition with this. And like the more Bitcoin continues growing and continues seeing scrutiny from governments, I mean, that really is just kind of a perfect setup as an easy political move to make. And like, I think that really is going to become a lot more common, especially along, I mean, like, as far as political parties, I don't think at all it's going to be something like Republicans and Democrats. But like, I do see, like, with the way that kind of line is really shifted and become wavy over the past maybe 10 years or so, like some kind of stark divide on Bitcoin is going to draw itself. And it's going to be something that politicians just see an easy like milking as far as public perception on either side they choose to take.
You know, this was so expected. We were expecting this since the creation of Bitcoin, but it yet still so strange to see it pours out in your eyes.
I mean, it's like we can't get around that. Like, it's going to become bigger. More people are going to pay attention to it. Politics is a thing that exists. Politicians just take things in the public consciousness and twist them based on like whatever their platform is. I mean, it's going to happen.
Yep, totally. It is. I mean, I'm kind of glad to see that it's a political issue, that it matters, that, you know, that there's enough people that are pro Bitcoin to where a politician was using it. And, you know, even the anti-Bitcoin people, at least they're hearing about Bitcoin. So that's probably a net positive too.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of like conservative and libertarian politicians that speak, you know, very positively about it. And, you know, at least surprising to me, there's a decent number of Democrats who, you know, have made positive comments or started accepting it as well. Like, I would argue more of like the kind of like technocrat futurist thinkers, but I mean, like, yeah, that like Ben Shapiro, for example, like he not too infrequently like brings up Bitcoin and just as like an alternative to like that more conservative financial investment planning of like, you know, solid long-term investments, not just kind of gambling with shit. And I don't think that's gonna fucking slow down at all. It's just going to keep snowballing. But
Yeah, don't disagree. Good stuff.
Mm-hmm. So I guess any final thoughts on this story before we move along to the thought loading process?
No, not for me.
Well, the only thing I have to say is that as a voluntarist, I am morally obligated to not send any of my Bitcoin to any politician. So sorry about that. But it's definitely cool that you're like, some of them are positive about it.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm also morally obligated not to vote, but that's I'm still glad that it's part of the conversation, even if it's two gangsters fighting over who's going to fleece the next batch of the public.
When is the first politician going to accept donations in Pepe Cash?
The moment he thinks Pepe Cash is popular enough to get him 10 votes.
All right. I'm going to start an illegal gambling pool on which crazy alt-right nutbag who decides to run for a political office decides to do that. All right, everybody, come on! It's time to degenerately gamble
for the good of democracy.
All right. Well, I guess I don't know. That about wraps up the news for today. So who's got final thoughts for the day?
My final thought is check out MathBot. Hit me up. Seriously, just go play the game and let me know if you like it or not. And if you put it in the hands of a couple kids, that would even be better because you know it's an early stage startup. So the main thing that we need, you know, we could always use some developer help too, of course, but the main thing we need is just feedback and testing. So it's easy to change stuff now. It'll be a lot harder to change stuff in 6 months. So hook me up, play the game, tell me where it sucks. All right, that's it.
Do it. This man is helping or trying to help children learn things beyond how high to jump. Come on.
Mathbot.com is the website.
Janine, what's going on? I don't see any thoughts to load. Are you okay?
I'm trying to find some thoughts. I don't. Yeah, the problem is that most of my thoughts come from things that I've liked on Twitter, and I haven't done that in a few days, and so I can't really find any.
Wait, what? What? Wait, your brain is empty of thoughts when you're not on Twitter? I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, I have thoughts in general, but I usually try to make thoughts like small stories or something, or good tweets that I've seen, and I don't have any at the moment.
Give us the 90-second update on what's going on with WikiLeaks. How about that? You're always up to date on that.
Oh God, what's the latest thing? So I don't know, I don't remember how much we went into it the last time WikiLeaks was a topic, but basically what's happening now is that it's kind of been suspected for a while that the US government is engaging very nefariously with Ecuador, because there's been some weird attacks happening on Ecuador's border, and then when this whole debate kind of started again about what should be done with Assange, because he's like, I don't know, he's not a person apparently anymore. He's, you know, a trading tool. And so that discussion started happening like a month or two ago, a lot more. And the US has been offering Ecuador help with its border issues. And weirdly enough, these border issues have never really been a problem before a few months ago. It's just kind of weird timing. So at the moment, I think since March, Assange has still not regained access to the internet. They actually have a jammer installed in the building that prevents him from connecting to Wi-Fi, including hotspots that activists are setting up outside of his window. He's also not allowed any visitors except for his lawyers. And so he's basically been isolated for a few months now, since I think sometime in March. And his mother has actually joined Twitter to kind of campaign on behalf of her son, and it's really heartbreaking. And so, yeah, I'm not, in general, I guess the US is again repeating, apparently the US Justice Department is saying that getting him arrested is their highest priority, which I think they said that a few years ago. And it's something we've been saying all along, that they are really pressuring the Ecuadorian government to hand him over. And that has been called a conspiracy theory, but I think it's pretty clear now because, I mean, it's a blatant statement. It wasn't an anonymous person saying it. It was an actual official statement. So not really sure what's going to happen with that at the moment. The weird thing is that he was actually supposed to video in, before he got his internet cut off again, he was supposed to video into a UK Parliament session that was going to talk about Cambridge Analytica. And then he had his internet cut off, so he wasn't able to participate in that. So that's as far as I know at the moment.
They are really not content with what happened prior to this. Fuck the United States government.
Hey, I forgot to mention one thing I wanted to do is a shout out Casa Hold'em, which is Jameson Lopp's company. So somebody was kind of giving me crap over my criticisms of Coinbase. So I applied the same criticisms to those guys. And I said, hey, what are you guys doing with all this data? Because they basically allow you to store large amounts of Bitcoin more securely. And the concern that I had around Coinbase is that it's this huge database that's just full of people's home addresses and how much Bitcoin they've purchased over the years, and that's going to get leaked, and it's just a matter of time before that happens, and it's going to be a real disaster for everybody that's used the service. So I hit those guys up on Twitter, and I got an answer like immediately. Unlike with somebody like Coinbase where they deflect, the answer was clear and straightforward. And basically you can open an account with these guys and you don't have to provide your real email address and your real name. And they will hold keys for you and help you secure your Bitcoin. So I have not done like a complete threat model on them, but I was very encouraged by that. And knowing that they've thought that one thing through gives me more confidence they've thought other things through. So check them out if you're looking for a place to store a lot of Bitcoin. And needing help to do that.
All right, and I guess Janine has a thought loaded.
Yeah, this was just a funny comic that XKCD made a few days ago. This is kind of, I don't know how many people have been following the GDPR thing, the new so-called data privacy regulation that's coming to Europe, but it's basically affecting companies all around the world. Any website. The funniest thing that's been happening is apparently some news sites like the USA Today, now if you look at them and you're coming from an EU-based IP address, I think that's how it works. You will basically be asked, like, do you agree to data sharing, or the new data sharing rules, the privacy policy, or do you want to opt out? And if you opt out, you get this like very, very run down version of the website that has like no graphics and just links to click on. And it's so nice because when, page loading is a huge problem with these sites because they have all of these trackers, they have all of these images, and it's like megabytes of data just to load a page. Whereas when you do the rundown version, it's only a few kilobytes. Like it's so awesome. So I mean, that's cool. I actually like that because it gives you the option to to have your news pages load faster without the glitzy, distracting graphics. So this was just a funny kind of joke about that regulation. The other news that I don't have a link for at the moment because Twitter is having issues is that HODL, which is a peer-to-peer exchange that launched, I think, at the beginning of the year or the end of last year. They announced that the ticket sales for the Baltic Honey Badger Conference, the second one, because the first one was last year, are going to start selling soon, I think this coming week. And that was, I would say that was the best conference that I saw of the year last year. So if anyone would be willing to fly all the way to Latvia, it's definitely worth it. So just be aware ticket sales start soon for that.
Any last thoughts from you, Nopara?
Yes, if you decide to kidnap a 13-year-old boy in South Africa for Bitcoin, then at least make sure you're using native segregated witness batch 32 addresses for that.
Oh, that's too dark even for me, man. That is a hell of a. Oh, jeez.
Well, my recommendation.
Now I know how I make you guys feel. Like now I know what it feels like to be on the receiving end of that. Like it's not funny to anybody else except for Nopara, and now I know.
I thought it was hilarious.
Nopara is to me like all the millennials are to JW. So
my recommendation is to use Ether because, like, you know, if the kid escapes or something, then you can get your transaction reversed.
All right. Too much. Breaking the theme. Come on.
Right.
Yes.
I'll give us an ending note. Okay. Guess what? 3 days. There's always money in the banana stand, motherfuckers. Arrested Development. 3 days, season 5. Bye.
See ya.